What's up, MMO Attack fans? This is Zach here, bringing you a first impressions video for EverQuest, a free-to-play MMORPG published and developed by Sony Online Entertainment. Now, this is a fairly old MMORPG. It's one of the very first MMORPGs. It was originally released in 1999 as a pay-to-play game. However, this past year it made the transition to free-to-play. And the free-to-play model wasn't really looked at very favorably. It was quite restrictive, and since then they've lifted a lot of those restrictions, especially in terms of your classes and races. Free players can now play as any class in any race that they so choose. And what we're looking at here is the character creation screen. We're essentially going to create a character, run through the first few minutes of the game, and just show you how it plays. You can see the wide variety of races available, and they're all sort of your standard fantasy archetypes like barbarians, dark elves, high elves, wood elves, dwarves, trolls, and ogres. But there's also some races that are specific to Norath, which is the world of EverQuest, which are the Ixar, which are a race of lizard people that actually had one entire expansion devoted to their homeland. Then you had the Vashir, which are a group of cat-like moon people, and the Froglocks, which essentially are, as they appear, sort of humanoid frog creatures. And then the Drakian, which is the newest race to see the light of day in Norath, and as you can see also seems to have the highest polygon count, which are supposedly descendants of dragons. For the purposes of this first impressions video, we're going to stick with the half-elf. Now, each class and race, well, I should say this, each class, or each race, can only be certain classes, so every race cannot be every class. There's a wide variety of classes available. They're not really, when you pick a class, they're not really organized in any certain way, so it can be difficult to tell what exactly each class does. But it follows the standard Holy Trinity model for MMORPGs. You have tanks, DPS, and healer classes. And I think if you're experienced with MMORPGs in a sense, that you'll be able to get the hang of it. Now, the only thing about EverQuest is it has a lot of hybrid classes, like the Druid, for example. The Druid can heal, but it's not really the best healer, and at high levels, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, there are other reasons to have a Druid in your party other than healing. The same thing for a Shaman. A Shaman could heal, but there are other reasons to have a Shaman in the party. For example, a lot of high-level content hits really, really hard and really, really fast. Something unique to EverQuest is the addition of, well, I would say 2 more roles. There's the guy that goes and pulls all the creatures to the group, and then there's the guy that debuffs the mob or buffs the party. A class like the Bard would do a lot of the buffing through playing some songs, but a class like the Shaman would debuff the mob to make it hit a lot less hard and a lot less frequently. But I think for the purposes of this first impressions video, we'll keep it simple and go with the Warrior. And we can choose from a variety of deities. Now, these deities do have some kind of statistical impact on the actual game itself, or your actual character itself, but I think we'll just stick with basically what we have here. Now, before, when this game originally came out, you could start at any one of the racial starting zones. But they've since changed that with one. I can't remember the name of the expansion pack exactly. I think Prophecy of Ro is the name of the expansion pack, but they've changed that somewhat. So now, the only place that you can start out is Crescent Reach. And the entire game, this game has had over probably 10 to 15, if not more than that, expansion packs. And over time, the progression in this game has gotten incredibly bloated. You have entire zones that pretty much no one ever uses anymore because they're so outdated, both in terms of graphical appeal and certain gear. Well, with Prophecy of Ro, it essentially allows players to go from level 1 all the way to what was then the level cap. And of course, then they can go to the newer zones, some newer expansions, strictly within those areas. So it gives all players a common zone to which they can meet up and do quests. It sort of shrinks the size of the world. I mean, yes, you still are more than welcome to go to these zones that are sort of more off the beaten path, but there's little reason to do so besides pure nostalgia. So we can actually customize our character's appearance by clicking the appearance button, and there is a few things we can change. Mostly we can give him a different face. He has a few different hairstyles with which we can take a look at. We can change his hair color, different hair colors, his facial hair color. So yeah, there's not a lot of character customization options in this game, but there again, this game's fairly old, and I think character customization is pretty good for what we have. All right, now it's gonna try to put us in a tutorial. I don't think I want to play the tutorial, so we're just gonna go ahead and cancel that, and we're gonna go ahead and enter the game world. Whoa, this is holy crap, what is this user interface? Yeah. If there's one deterrent I would have to say to EverQuest, it's the user interface. The user interface is a mess. It used to be a lot worse than this, if you guys can actually believe that. But essentially, this is where we are. It's a lot better now. I don't have to spend probably the first 5 to 10 minutes of this first impressions video rearranging my user interface. But this is essentially Crescent's Reach. And as you can see, for a game released in 1999, I mean, of course, this is not one of the original zones in EverQuest. This is one of the newer zones, but still, I mean, I think they've managed to do pretty well for this graphics engine. Alright, well, essentially, we have a little pop-up window here. It says, your journey into the worlds. You have the ability to summon a tome that will help guide you through Norath. Open the Alt Advanced window, summon. Under this tab, you will find the ability called Summon Tome of the Hero's Journey. Select it, make it to a hotkey, summon a book that you can read that helps information about more you might be interested in questing. Well, that sounds unique. So let's go ahead and hail this guy here. We get a quest. Now, questing was initially not a big part of EverQuest. Essentially, progression in EverQuest was strictly grind-based. In other words, you would go out from the city gates, kill some rats, kill some skeletons, kill some orcs, and the further and further as you progress through the game, you would slowly get further and further and further away from the town gates. And it would eventually reach a point where you couldn't progress in the game without being in a group with other people. A full group with healers, tanks, DPS, and other such classes. And you would essentially go to a certain location and you would just sit there for a while. Somebody would bring the mobs to you and then you would attack, and then you'd do this for hours and hours and hours. It was a very social experience, but it wasn't quite, it didn't have that same sense of progression. Well, since then, EverQuest or Sony has tried to implement some questing elements into EverQuest, so it's more quest-based than it was before, but it still doesn't quite match up to games like World of Warcraft. Alright, so let's see. Welcome to Crescent Reach, the Diamond of the Mountains. Emissary Tinvin recommends that you visit all their guild masters. She suggests that you seek out Initiate Drakon and Innkeeper Fathus for work. Glory to Vishen, the Worm Queen. So, we're going to go ahead and accept that quest and find the Master's Hall down the path from Tinvin. Train with your Guildmaster if you wish. Alright, well, essentially we can just follow this little path down here, but say we didn't know where we were looking for. We could press Control F, and it essentially brings up the Find window. And it lists all the NPCs in the immediate area. And so if we wanted to, and I'm not sure which one exactly is in the same location that we need to be, but say we wanted to find one, we would just click on their name, and then we would have this magic trail that would lead us to where we're going. Now, this magic trail is not incredibly wieldy from time to time. Sometimes it's going to lead you into a wall. But again, for an older game, I think this is an honest attempt at making quest progression flow a little bit better, so you won't have to spend all your time looking for certain people. But it's still not quite as easily done as something, you know, as a quest helper in more modern MMORPGs. Alright, there's our warrior guild master, Commander Manalis. Let's hail him. Let's see. Essentially, I think we just talked to the guy, and is there anything? Yeah, we're going to go ahead and train up our one-handed slashing. You already trained your limits in one-handed slashing. Yeah, essentially, again, that's how the game, when you level up, of course, you have a character level, but you also have different stats, or stat levels. And you want to make sure that your skills are trained adequately enough in comparison to your character level, because if not, say if you don't have a high enough skill in one-handed slashing, you're going to miss all the time. Or if you don't have a high enough skill in, say, your taunt ability, then your taunt is never going to work, and your taunt's incredibly essential for a warrior. So let's go ahead and I thought I completed the quest. Yeah, the questing, I really do think that the new way of going about this is actually more difficult, or the new newbie experience in this game is actually more difficult than the old one. I mean, the old one was just go out and kill stuff, and this one is you have to go to all these different locations and you gotta find them, and you don't know where they are, and then you don't know, especially if you come from a game like WoW, you reach a point where it's like, oh, I don't have any more quests. What do I do? It's not as easily, it's not as easy to figure out where you're going and what you're doing, and it sort of guides you by the hand, but it doesn't. It sort of leaves you hanging too. And there's a little pop-up window. It says you can upgrade to gold membership. We don't want to do that. There's all kinds of different tiers, of course. And if you're I think if were a subscriber at one point, you do get some advantages in comparison to if you were never a subscriber before. All right, speak with Initiate Drakon near the Traveler's Nook in the city. We're going to use our little handy find window to see if we can find who we're looking for. Initiate Drakon. Let's see. Is he going to be in here? There he is. Okay, so there again, we're just going to click the follow window. There's our NPC. Now, to talk to these NPCs, we have to press the H key or /hail, and then they'll say something to you in the main chat window. And a lot of times, what they'll say, some of the text with what they'll say will be highlighted in brackets. And to talk to the NPCs and to get quests and to progress through quests, this is essentially what you have to do. You have to talk back to the NPC, but you have to include the word in brackets, which is sort of a signal to the NPC to say, hey, give me the next step in the quest. So he says, what would you like to learn? And then I would just type something with the word learn in it. Just like that right there. All right, and now he's talking to me again. He says, my dragon father, Vinesh the Green Blood, pass wisdom on to me so that I may instruct you. You must venture into the world and learn more about this place and your strength. There are a few tasks that for you to complete if you're willing. Well, I would say, what tasks? The ways of nature are often confounding, as Vinesh, my great dragon father, says. There are some curious mushrooms, dangerous types of venom sacs, and diseased spiders. So I'm going to say, what diseased spiders? My father has given us a great challenge, and our final task is learning the ways of nature. In the hollow, there are some spiders that have gotten a grim illness. They hide, but Vinesh told me it takes time to kill the area. Might draw the ones out of hiding. Are you up for it? You know, I would say I am up for it. And he doesn't do anything. Sometimes this doesn't work. Hello? Okay, there we go. I had to, for some reason I didn't have him targeted, and I had to target him again. Alright, so, where do we go from here? I think we want to go out here, because I think this is where the spiders are. I may have to kill some small rats and things to level up a bit so I can actually kill these spiders, but we'll have to see. So we're going to just go down here, and combat in this game is very, very simple. Combat in this game... Yeah, I'm going to have to, because the spiderlings are yellow. You can't, in this game, you can't tell what level any of the NPCs are, or the monsters. You can only see, like, if you click on them, they'll be yellow, or red, or gray, or green, or blue, or light blue, and essentially it follows this model. If they're gray, which means they're incredibly easy and you'll get no experience. Green means that you'll get a small amount of experience, if any at all. Light blue means you'll get a very small amount of experience. Dark blue means that they're lower level than you, but not by much, maybe a couple of levels or so, and you'll get an adequate amount of experience. White means they're even level with you, and you should get a fair bit of experience. Yellow means they're slightly higher level than you. They'll be difficult, and you'll get a good bit of experience. Red means it's best that you don't try to attack the NPC because it's likely that he's a much higher level than you. And now we're doing some combat here, and as you can see, combat in EverQuest is very, very simple. Combat is essentially you press your auto attack button and then you watch your character attack. Now, as a tank or as a warrior, I do have a couple of abilities. I have my kick ability and my taunt ability. Both of those abilities, I want to make sure I spawn as much as I can, or I spam as much as I can. Both of those abilities I want to make sure I do, because I want to make sure that those abilities level up along with me, so that when I'm in a group later on, I can actually taunt, and I can actually kick, and I can actually hold aggro, and I have a bunch of people who, because this game is so old, are probably not new players, and have definitely twinked out their characters somewhat and are probably going to be pulling lots of aggro. What do I mean by twinking out the characters? Well, EverQuest, unlike newer MMORPGs, doesn't really restrict characters in terms of the gear that they can wear quite as much as newer games. And that you can take a level 1 character and deck him out in gear that he might otherwise not get his hands on for another 20 or 30 levels, if not more than that. And some gear even doesn't really have a level restriction, but the stats sort of grow with your character. In other words, you may get a sword that doesn't really do much for you at level 2 or 3, but by the time you reach level 60, it has much greater stats because the sword is truly meant to be used by a level 60 character, although it can be used at lower levels, just with a slight decrease in stat bonuses. So essentially, this is classic EverQuest. What we're doing here is we're level 1, so we don't quite have a license to go kill lots of fancy enemies. We have to kill rabbits right outside. We're not even outside of the city gates. Inside of the city gates is what we're doing right now. And you can definitely tell how that's changed in more modern MMOs, which kind of puts you around killing the cool stuff from level 1 to try and entice you further into the game. Well, EverQuest was definitely towards that opposite viewpoint. EverQuest says that you got to work for your cool stuff. If you want if you want to see some of the cool zones and kill some of the cool monsters and do some of the cool content, you got to work for it. You got to earn it. And I mean, you can sort of see why the MMO genre never really took off when EverQuest was king. But I think that there's something to be said for that, and there's a certain amount of people that I think really appreciate that style of gameplay and want to see a game kind of go back to that. But aside from that, aside from the fact that this game is so old, EverQuest really brings to a new player quite a bit. You know, if the player can actually progress through the game, get to the level cap, and do all of this content, which most of its player base have been doing for a decade, I think the player will find that this game has an almost unrivaled amount of content, rivaled probably